Hello and welcome back to Comics Over Time. This season, which we're calling Murdock and Marvel, a history of Marvel Comics starring Daredevil, we're breaking down the year in the comic book industry in two parts. In part one, we'll look at the state of the comic book industry as a whole, as well as what things were going on in society that may have impacted the comic book industry during that year. We'll talk big picture about what's going on at DC and independent comics, then we'll shift our focus to Marvel. We'll look at who is creating comics, what new characters or storylines were introduced, and which comics debuted or ended. In part 2, we'll dive deep into Marvel's longest-running characters, Matt Murdock. We'll look at what the year had in store for the Man Without Fear, key things that happened, and who joined or left his world before spotlighting one key issue or story. From there, we'll wrap up the year's discussion with a takeaway before moving on to another year and a whole new discussion. We're excited to have you join us on a trip through comic book history. And we are back with part 2 of our discussion of 2009. We're going to be looking at Daredevil this week. My name is Dwayne, and with me, as always, is my good buddy Dan. Dan, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It may not seem to you, dear listeners, but there's been a gulf of many weeks and thousands of miles since last we spoke. So
it has.
I am ready to be back talking Daredevil.
And a bunch of sickness on my end, so apologies in advance for how I sound, and if you catch a rogue cough here and there, I will do my best to hit the mute button, and there we go. So, yeah, it has been a while, Dan, and boy, this is a big year, and it sets up an even bigger year in 2010.
Yeah, there's been a lot going on in Marvel the last few years, kind of like we talked about last week with all of the stuff with Dark Reign and some of the stuff coming out of Secret Invasion and all of that. And it really completely follows through into Daredevil. Sometimes Daredevil exists on his own. This year, he does not exist on his own.
No.
You can see a lot of things bleeding through.
No, definitely not. So, I guess without further ado, let's jump in and let's talk about the year for Daredevil. The year in Daredevil.
All right, Dwayne. So, we've got a pretty substantial list of appearances for us here. Daredevil not only has his own title for now, but also there's a bunch of other appearances, not only in terms of other books, but a couple other books were appearances where he's the headliner as well. So, what is the sort of the menu looking like for the year in Daredevil?
Sure. So it's interesting. The year for Daredevil starts off with his main title, issues 113 to 119, and then for issue 110 to 120, they renumber it so that it is issue 500. So talking about all of volume 1 and now volume 2 as well, they get a big, fantastic 500 issues. So I feel like they get to do kind of a little bit of getting a bite of the apple twice, because they got it up last, in 2008, they got an issue 100 out of this run.
Yep.
And then they can now get a 500th issue in 2009. Seems pretty good if you could do that.
Yep, oversized, overpriced, etc. So,
yes.
Frustrating.
On top of that, Daredevil had a mini series called Daredevil Noir, 4 issues for that. Also, there was a Dark Reign, The List, Daredevil #1, a one-shot that proves actually really integral to the main Daredevil story. So we're going to talk about that during the year of. But beyond that, you see Daredevil in all sorts of places. The New Avengers, Secret Invasion, Age of Sentry, Fantastic Four, Mighty Avengers. He was in a couple What Ifs, the newer Fantastic Four and What If Secret Wars, New Warriors, Amazing Spider-Man, Marvel's Eye of the Camera, Ultimate Spider-Man, Astonishing Tales, Dark Reign, Fantastic Four, Deadpool, Suicide Kings, Exiles, Strange Tales, and then there was a Marvel 70th Anniversary Collection book that he also appeared in as well. So all sorts of sightings for our man Matt Murdock, or Daredevil, throughout the Marvel universe in 2009. Now, Dan, you wanted to talk a little bit about Daredevil Noir. I didn't get a chance to read this, but that was it. It didn't really necessarily play into the larger kind of story that's being told right now by Ed Brubaker, was it?
No, and in fact, this is actually, for most folks, you will not know Daredevil Noir because he doesn't really appear very often. But if you've been watching any of the animated Spider Verse stuff, and you remember the Nick Cage Spider Man Noir, this is the Noir verse or whatever that Marvel created in 2008. So Marvel Noir starts out with Spider Man and the whole Spider Man Noir. And then after that, you get Noir versions of sort of the X Men, Daredevil, Wolverine, later on, like Luke Cage, Iron Man, get their options, that sort of stuff. It is set in a different universe, what they call Earth 90214. And
Okay.
so, because of that, it is not a part of the main 616 continuity. They're just doing their own thing. It is set basically in the 1940s. It's a sort of non-superpowered version in many ways, or less superpowered or superhero-y version of the universe that kind of looks like a cross between a Humphrey Bogart movie and Blade Runner.
Okay.
And they're actually pretty good. I reread these just kind of to remind myself of them for the podcast. This one's interesting because essentially it's got a very similar Daredevil story. You've still got Foggy, you've still got the Kingpin, you've still got Matt Murdock, but the idea is that essentially it's set in a 1940s environment, and the main story is that there's a femme fatale named Eliza who comes into Foggy and Matt's office looking for help, and she ends up actually being what they call the Bullseye Killer, essentially a gender flipped version of Bullseye, who Matt, of course, falls in love with, and then has to take down and gets all weepy about. So it's pretty good though. If you like sort of the more the noirish kind of books, this Spider-Man noir alternative universe from 2008 to around 2010 is actually pretty decent stuff. This is a 4-issue series, and it was entertaining, but it's completely outside regular continuity. You do not need to know it. It is not authentic. Somebody else kills Daredevil's dad, and that's all involved in this as well. So there's a number of changes kind of to his history. He also doesn't get hit by a radioactive truck. He is slammed into the wall by the same guy who shoots his dad, and that's how he loses his sight. So,
Gotcha. Okay. That makes me feel better that I didn't get a chance to read those books. I wasn't entirely sure that they existed until I was putting together the list of appearances today, and I was like, oh, there was another series that occurred.
yeah, it's
So
actually really well done. I liked the art in it a lot. I liked the story pretty well. It was interesting though how much it did look Blade Runnerish. There was times where the Eliza character looked very much like she was straight out of Rachel from Blade Runner, and a lot of the kind of just the set pieces and stuff had that feel to them. But it was good. Yeah.
all right. So looking at the main Daredevil run, we had Ed Brubaker back for pretty much the entire year. We He did 113 to 119 and the big 500 issue, and then that's where he leaves off, and we get a new writer, Andy Diggle, that comes in with issue 501. As far as pencils go, we had Michael Lark doing most of this year. Lark, along with Todi Zanjic and Stefano Gaudiano, did issue 115. David Aja did 116. And then Lark and Gaudiano did issue 500. And then with Andy Diggle, we get Roberto De La Torre doing issue 501 on pencils. And then as far as inks go, Stefano Gaudiano did most of the Brubaker run. Matt Hollinsworth did issue 115. Klaus Janson, Chris Samney, and Paul Azenta did issue 500, and then Roberto De La Torre did issue 501 that he did pencils for. So pretty stable creative team as far as 2009 goes, but we did get that handoff very late in the year. So
Yep.
really interesting stuff. And so it's interesting because I loved Brian Michael Bendis quite a bit, and then we've had Ed Brubaker, and now we're reaching the end of the Ed Brubaker run, and then we're going to get another creative team at the end of the year. And so I was very curious to see. I didn't know when exactly he left the title, but it was interesting to see just how the year would go leading up to, and then his eventual kind of exit from the book. So there's a lot that actually happens throughout 2009 as we kind of build up to this issue 500, which ends up being the last issue that Ed Brubaker is on. So as far as what happens this year, 2009 begins with the final 3 parts of that Lady Bullseye storyline that we talked about to finish up our discussion on 2008. In that, we see Daredevil, Black Tarantula, and the White Tiger, along with Master Izo, trying to take down the Hand once and for all. But the Hand were trying to recruit Daredevil to be their leader. And we don't really know if he accepted or not, but that story ends with Lord Hiroshi, Lady Bullseye, Black Tarantula, and White Tiger boarding a plane to Spain, where Lady Bullseye says they're going to pursue a plan B. We had no idea necessarily what that plan B was going to be until that next issue, which was like in March or April, I want to say. We get to find out what's going on in Spain. In March, I guess it was in March, we get the return of another old foe, Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin himself, in an aptly titled story titled Return of the King. In part 1 of this story, we see Fisk is in Spain, where he's befriended and fallen in love with a woman, Marta, and her 2 kids, only to see Lady Bullseye and the Hand killing them, causing him to revert back to his old ways. And this was a really well-told story and a really gut-wrenching story, Dan. Just that first
issue. Yep.
First issue of this story. I think at the end of that book, I actually felt a little sorry for the Kingpin.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, essentially his girlfriend and her kids were murdered simply because they knew him, right?
Yes.
I also will say that, Brubaker's a fantastic writer, but he also is somebody who calls back to a lot of the classics. And I could not help but think a little bit of Godfather Part 2. Was it Godfather Part 1? I can never remember. But when essentially Al Pacino's character is sent back to Sicily, and he falls in love and everything like this, and then his wife blows up in the car, and that's kind of what we're seeing here. That you got somebody who, they've done bad things, but still, there's things you have to feel bad for somebody for, and it was a really well written story.
Yes.
With the idea that you did get the feeling that while he was still dangerous, Kingpin was seemingly ready to disappear into anonymity and just sort of live out his life there without coming back and needing more vengeance and everything else until this happened.
Yeah, he did see, like, at the start of the story, he very much felt like there was the powder keg was just ready to be ready to explode, and like he wasn't going to be able to do that. And then he befriends this woman, meets her kids, they get together, and they're like talking and playing and board games and reading and strolls on out in public and stuff, and things just are like, oh my God, he's actually found a little bit of happiness, and he is going to just be okay. And, he's
Yep.
concerned that this sort of thing could happen, and so he's kind of very concerned and very like worries a lot about Marta and her kids because something like this could happen, and then unfortunately his worries are very well founded that Lady Bullseye and the Hand come looking for him and do what he's worried about for the better part of the issue.
Yep, exactly. And they do a nice job of building up tension there. This again. This is the second, kind of like we talked about last week. This second or third year Brubaker has won Writer of the Year, right? Basically, he's just dominating comic book writing right now, and so we have been very lucky as Daredevil readers that this is one of the big books that he's sort of showing off on right now. Right. And man, is he good at this sort of stuff.
Yeah. So as the story continues, Kingpin returns to New York and announces his return and his plans to deal with Daredevil. That plan turns out to be working with Daredevil to take down the Hand. Meanwhile, Foggy is upset at Matt's constant absence from the law firm. He ends up confronting him at Matt's house and ultimately ends up firing him. Just in a sort of kind of fit of just disgust and just frustration, he just fires him, just says, don't come to work anymore. Which is, I think, really something for Foggy, because he has been put through the absolute rigor by Matt time and time again, and we've never seen him do something like this. And it's interesting because he immediately regrets it. Like, the next few issues and the rest of the year, he definitely regrets it.
But should he?
No, he definitely should.
I mean, 100% no. Matt Murdock deserves to be fired. There's no question.
Yes.
He's sleeping with one of his employees. He's essentially keeping things from his partners. Not only, the fact that he's sleeping with one of his employees, but also other information about that sort of thing that they need for a case they're working on. Obviously, there's all the other conflicts of interest he brings in. I mean, he should have been fired 100 times already.
Yes. So, no, there's no doubt of that.
Yeah.
So as the story continues, Daredevil tries to locate Master Aizu without success, and then begins to doubt his alliance with Kingpin, suspecting that Fisk might be using the Hand and the Owl to wipe out his rivals. Fisk, who is haunted by visions of his old wife Vanessa, meets with the Owl and gives him Lady Bullseye's next target, which turns out to be Foggy Nelson. Yes, that's right, Foggy Nelson in the crosshairs again, just because he is friends and partner with Matt Murdock. The conclusion of this story is that renumbered, giant-sized issue 500 of Daredevil, which also ends up being the conclusion of the Ed Brubaker run on Daredevil, and that's got to be our spotlight for this week. There is just this whole story has been building, and kind of like from the Lady Bullseye story into the Return of the King story, it all sort of is one big story, and it culminates in this really big climactic finish. So we're going to talk about that in great detail here in just a little bit. After that, we get that Dark Reign the List 1 issue in which we see Bullseye, who's now working under the Hawkeye identity, going after Daredevil at the behest of Norman Osborn. Daredevil pursues him, but ends up falling into a trap that Bullseye has created for him, which is he follows him into a building full of protesters, and then Bullseye blows up this building. The blast kills 107 people, leaving Matt devastated and furious, and he's determined to take action to deal with the corruptness that has infested the city in his city government and in the police department and all that sort of thing. So it is this is a huge story, actually.
Yeah, and this, of course, plays into the fact that, Bullseye is now Hawkeye in the Dark Avengers, essentially, where there's a number of bad guys or questionable heroes who are impersonating other. Venom is wearing the Spider-Man suit, and Norman Osborn himself is in the Iron Patriot armor, which essentially is an amalgam of the Captain America and Iron Man armor. Bullseye is taking on the persona of Hawkeye in that group. In the list, he does get the order from Osborn to go and essentially, do this task. And in so doing, he takes off the Hawkeye uniform, finds his old Bullseye costume, and everything he does in this issue actually is done in the Bullseye uniform, not the Hawkeye uniform.
Okay.
So he is not actually like Hawkeye going out and killing 107 people by blowing up a building. He does revert back to his old costume, and he's like, hey, it's the bad guy. And basically what he's saying is, Murdock, if you just killed me when you had the chance, and you just had the chance again a couple minutes ago, all these people wouldn't be dead. You think you're the good guy, but you're not the good guy because you keep letting all this happen when you could do something about it. Right?
Yeah.
And so he's essentially, trying to just taunt him, trying to break him. It's the standard psychological torture that Daredevil's enemies put upon him. But what I hate about the list, though, is this is fundamental information for the Daredevil comic that is not in the Daredevil comic.
Correct.
The other thing that makes it even worse is I think there's only 9 issues of Daredevil this year. So there's absolutely no reason this just couldn't have been another issue of Daredevil stuck into one of those months when they didn't have an issue.
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense.
There is no regular. So this has a cover date of November 2009. There is no Daredevil book in 2009. It is this.
Or in November.
In for November. And
yep.
And you don't. If you read issue 500 and then you read issue 501, in the recap, you find out that Bullseye's done this, but you wouldn't have known. You'd know it if you read the book, but you wouldn't have known you needed to read the book until you read issue 501 and then read about it in the recap. It's really something.
Yeah, but it's not recapped on like a graphical page either. You have to literally read the text.
It's 2 sentences in the or a paragraph in the recap text on the first page.
This sort of drove me a little bit nuts. I didn't understand why they made that a separate book. I suppose so they could have another number 1 to put out that.
Yes, because they just did a 500 issue, so obviously they were hurting on sales and needed to get another number 1 out there.
Exactly.
So following the events of Dark Reign, the list, we get the start of a new story from a new creative team, Andy Diggle and Roberto De La Torre, entitled The Devil's Hand. In it, we see Matt Murdock as leader of the Hand. Since most of this story takes place in 2010, we're going to save this story and talk about it more during our 2010 discussion. And oh boy,
because we don't have anything else to talk about in 2010.
Yeah, well, I mean,
so we might as well add another book on. So.
There's to be fair, so I've read ahead and I've read through a lot of the books in 2010. It is all one giant story, and like it makes sense that this discussion would occur together. But yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about in 2 weeks when we get to talking about 2010. But yeah.
I'm not actually questioning you. I'm just being salty about just how many crazy Daredevil stories there were to keep up on in next year's kind of list. It's a ton, because we have Daredevil really for the first time ever being the center of a major Marvel event.
Yes,
that extends through all sorts of stuff. So
yes.
It's this book 501 is the beginning of something very big that is going to basically consume most of New York for the better part of the year. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to trying to put together notes to kind of explain everything that happens next year because there is an absolute lot. It is crazy. So, but that is the year for Daredevil. Um, Quite an end to the Ed Brubaker run. He
Mhm.
like he won me over. Like I still think I like Brian Michael Bendis a little bit more, but these he did a really good job during his run on Daredevil.
So that is, it is definitely just two fantastic, sets of stories. So there's no reason to really compare negatively either of them. It really does depend, I think, a little bit on whether you like the slightly more psychological twist that Bendis takes, or the slightly more sort of dark underworldy sort of take that Lark take or that Brubaker takes. But the other thing is, in some ways, it probably depends on whether you're more of a fan of Michael Lark and his sort of very, very precise sort of cinematic artwork, or if you're a fan of Alex Maleev and his sort of crazy, very experimental, very, you know, kind of, what do you call it, fluid and impressionistic sort of style. So both of those writers, I think it would be interesting to see them switch artists and how it
Right.
would impact things.
Yeah.
Um,
It definitely could have. Um, I I I liked. I think Michael Lark's art across the Ed Brubaker run matched the Brubaker story really well. I think he did a really good job of
no,
putting the story that Ed Brubaker had onto the page quite well.
yeah, I think that Lark and then Sean Phillips, who of course is his regular collaborator on things like Criminal and like, are really the two people who are sort of the best collaborators for Brubaker and his style. And so he's done a lot with them, and they're fantastic together. So both of those guys found an artist that they really clicked with and have leveraged them to great success. So, but yeah, I think this was an interesting year. It is going to be tough to lose Brubaker, but Diggle is a good writer. I think that it's definitely a weird year in 2010, but I think Diggle did a good job considering the craziness that he's presented. So, uh, and then we've got a bunch of other really interesting writers coming up in the next few years here as well. But I am always saddened to see somebody like Brubaker leave a title because they are to an extent irreplaceable. So
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Should
so
we jump
really
in?
though, I was
Oh,
gonna say, so really though, we talked the end of the Lady Bullseye story last week. We're not taking 501 until next week. We've got 500 for the spotlight. So really, the only thing we want to maybe talk a little bit about is I'm wondering if you had anything else from those few issues before 501 that sort of you wanted to talk about or that you found interesting. Sort of the early part of Daredevil or of Kingpin returning to New York and sort of some of that stuff going on. Because to me, what I found interesting is the number of people pointing fingers at each other, and you've got Daredevil and the Owl and Lady Bullseye, and Lady Bullseye, and she's the one that goes over to Spain and kills Fisk's girlfriend,
right.
and then later on she's standing at his side during a lot of the stuff that's happening. So
Yes.
it's weird how everybody just gets jumbled around, and it's very difficult to tell allegiances. You have uh, Tarantula and the White Tiger, who are both of them essentially turned to the hand, where they have these red eyes and the like. So early on, you actually see the White Tiger basically get killed by Lady Bullseye. She puts a sword right through her. And then
Right.
next time you see her, she's perfectly healthy, but she's got her red
Yep.
eyes, and now she's on the other team. So it's really interesting how a lot of that happens. Also, the fact that not only is, you know, Dakota North captured, and I think that happens before 500. We'll talk about
Yes.
some of that during 500, I think. But so she's captured, and then they also are ordering the assassination of Foggy. And so we start to see some of that stuff, and I believe that comes to a head in 500, correct?
It does, yeah.
But so all this is going on. Master Izo, what do you think of Master Izo?
He is something else. Like I don't know what to think about him because he's like this. I don't know. He's very old. Seems to be very much drunk most of the time, or at least wishes he was drunk most of the time. Um, Seems hell bent on taking down the Hand, which
Mm-hmm.
seems like a good endeavor one should have, and has sort of enlisted Daredevil to try and help him do that. Um,
And he's old.
See,
He's hundreds
yes,
of years old. He's evidently
yes,
the mentor of Stick, who was the
right,
oldest Dust dude who, back when Daredevil was starting out, trained him originally. So this is actually sort of like his ninja grandpappy to a certain extent,
right.
right?
Yeah,
Um,
I don't think he knows that, but yeah, that's like Master Izo knows. I don't think Matt Murdock
that
knows
he
that.
tells
Yeah.
him. Maybe he doesn't. Yeah. So it's kind of crazy, but I like a lot of these characters. But it is crazy the number of moving parts, the number of things going on. The fact that even Turk now is actually a pretty regular character going in and out and doing stuff. And, it's everything is organized so well. It's just a
Yes.
ballet that Brubaker has going during this.
It,
And
it
the whole
it is
thing's a
it is
mess.
it is a little bit confusing though. Like what the owl gets like badly hurt and it like kind of because he's kind of taken over when Kingpin left and now that Kingpin is back. Kingpin could sort of like I think he had him injured, but like doesn't have him killed because the owl has a part to play. He tells Lady Bullseye, and
Yep.
so Lady Bullseye ends up kind of working with the owl, and he's sort of her handler, even though like so they're both sort of working for Kingpin throughout all this, and that's why she ends up having to potentially go after Foggy Nelson because Kingpin that's what Kingpin wants, and it is weird. Like you said, there is all of these people who are attempting to kill one another or make their lives miserable end up sort of working together all in an attempt to sort of take down
Yep.
Daredevil and the Hand, but
Yep.
not really the Hand. I don't know.
Yeah.
It is a little weird and complicated.
Because the whole thing with the Hand is right now they're sort of up for grabs because
They
they've
are,
lost their leader,
yes.
and so now they're looking for a new one, and they just seem to be bouncing back and forth. Like, will you lead us? And all they want are people from Daredevil comics to lead them. Evidently, that's the only choices that can be made. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Should we
you're
move on and talk about the spotlight then
you
for this
ready?
week?
You ready to talk about the spotlight?
Yeah, let's jump in and let's talk about issue 500 of Daredevil. This week's spotlight story.
All right, Dwayne. You've decided to simply take the easy route and choose the quadruple-sized book or whatever for your spotlight for today. Daredevil 500, October 2009. This is the conclusion of that Return of the King storyline. Tell us a little bit about this and why you decided it was your spotlight.
I mean, first of all, why I picked this is like this is kind of the story for this year. Like really to your point, we had the spillover of Lady Bullseye, the start of the year. We have a new creative team that picks up after this. This is the culmination of Ed Brubaker's run on the title, so this needed to be the book that we talked about in detail. So this book begins with Master Izo recalling his past as a member of the Hand and how he left them after blinding himself. You then flash forward to the present day. We see Izo bringing Matt to see Mila for a final goodbye, after which he calls Foggy to say that he's agreed to finally give up custody on Mila to her parents. Foggy is then attacked by the Hand because he's the newest target, along with Black Tarantula and and the White Tiger. It's interesting because it was Lady Bullseye was sort of the one that was supposed to go after Foggy, but it ends up being Black Tarantula and the White Tiger that end up attacking Foggy and Dakota North when push comes to shove. Next, we see another memory showing Izo being expelled from the chase by Stick. Meanwhile, Matt searches for Dakota, who's been kidnapped by the Owl, and Foggy is in danger on the law firm's rooftop. Another flashback reveals how Izo first met Matt after his accident, and he's the one that called Stick and ended up having Stick become the mentor of Matt Murdock. Really quite something how we're seeing these flashbacks of Master Izo and learning more about Master Izo, who's been sort of this kind of a very important character throughout the Brubaker run, but we didn't really necessarily know much about him other than he's a really old master of martial arts and, knew of Matt Murdock and wants to take down the Hand. But now we're getting a little bit more depth of him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Daredevil and Master Izo rescue Dakota and defeat the Owl. Izo then reveals that Black Tarantula has been a mole inside the Hand all along. He saves Foggy. Black Tarantula saves Foggy, and then also tries to free the White Tiger from the Hand's control. So we talked about the fact that those two seem to be under the control of the Hand, and it seems as though White Tiger actually was under the control of the Hand, and the Black Tarantula was just playing along throughout this.
I think what actually happens is the Tarantula's got kind of a healing factor that let him sort of slough off the effect.
Oh, okay.
So
I misunderstood. So he was under the influence of the Hand for a little while, and then suddenly was able to, over time, was eventually able to break free of that, and then was sort of playing along after that.
That was what Izo had essentially had told him, was that once he comes back from the dead, his healing powers will eventually let him essentially get their evil or whatever out, kind of like basically just getting rid of a cold or something like this, but it'll take a little while. So for a while he was under the thrall, and then eventually he finds his way out, and then he's the mole at that point. How he makes his eyes glow red like that at that point, I don't know.
I don't know.
But oh well. Anyway,
comics. That's how that
comics.
Works.
That is exactly how that works.
So Wilson Fisk presents himself to the Hand and offers to lead them, but Daredevil arrives with Master Izo. Matt defeats Lady Bullseye and then takes command of the Hand, expelling Wilson Fisk and Lady Bullseye from the building. So they have this giant showdown in this like warehouse thing, and well, as you said, the Hand was sort of up for grabs. Wilson Fisk, I think, was like, I know, I'm ruthless enough. I'm not ruthless enough as it is. Maybe if I have the Hand on my side, I could be even more ruthless. So he offers to take control of them. And it even seemed like Lady Bullseye wanted to run the Hand there or like a little bit as well. And both of them are like trying to convince them, but Matt Murdock comes in along with Master Izo and basically says, all right, I'll take you up on your offer. You offered it. I accept. I'm going to do this. And
essentially, he doesn't want Fisk to take over because it's like, look, Fisk is enough trouble already. If he's got a globalist, like cabal of assassins at his command, it's not going to be good for anybody. So I'll take them over, and then my kinder, gentler sort of ways will allow me to reform the Hand, this group of international assassins, into, I don't know, a UNICEF type organization or something he's got planned, right? But
Mm-hmm.
in any case, it's the Peace Corps, the new Daredevil Peace Corps.
There
But
you go.
somehow he thinks he's going to be able to use the hand for good. And it's interesting because Izo's like, that's not the way this works, kid.
No.
Right? He's very insistent. He's like, look, I know you think you're doing the right thing, but this you cannot you can't reform the hand. You can't work from within with an organization like this. They're going to corrupt you. You have to understand the dangers you're putting yourself in. And Matt's like, what could go wrong?
Yeah,
I've got this.
There's no way this could go wrong. There's just absolutely no way this could go wrong. I'm such a stand-up gentleman. There's no way this could go wrong.
So, but yeah, he's and again, it's his optimism and his hubris both.
Yeah.
That somehow he thinks the hand can somehow be used for good, and then also that he believes that he is the guy to be able to do this.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So the story ends with Dakota and Foggy finding a letter from Matt asking them to store his belongings. Wilson Fisk accepts his defeat while Lady Bullseye confronts Master Aizu, her former master, for deceiving her. Matt, now accompanied by his new allies from the Hand, descends into the depths to face his trial. He's got to prove that he's worthy of leading the Hand, so they have a test for him, and so he's going to descend in underground and face whatever trial they have set for him to prove that he's worthy of taking over the Hand. So that is the main story that we got in the issue, but also in this 500th issue, we got a short story called Three Jacks from Ann Nesenti returned along with David Aja. And in this flashback story, we see Daredevil and the original Bullseye scoring off in an amusement park. During the fight, Matt Murdock gets badly wounded, but he's actually saved by a teenage girl named Gina and another man that happens to be there as well. Really, really cool little story. Just sort of this out of continuity flashback sort of story. I really actually liked this little story that they had in there.
Yeah, it's interesting to me too, being able to see sort of a classic writer, because Nesenti is somebody who, you know, a lot of her like big time writing comics was in the late 80s and the 90s. She had a really long, successful run on Daredevil. Coming back and then working with someone who's one of these sort of like more modern artists like Aja, you get a really interesting story where you can kind of see how those two styles work together. And one thing that's interesting is the number of panels you end up with. And I think because of the fact Nesenti, as somebody who came out of the 80s and 90s, does a lot more dialogue than a lot of modern writers do. A lot of these pages had 12 panels, 10 panels. It was 4, 8, 9, 10, 13 panels. There was a lot of...
It was dense story.
He had to make it dense. And it's interesting just seeing that push and pull of sort of the new and the old. Because most of the time, Aja would not have this many panels on a page working with a lot of the guys that he works with now, you know?
Yeah.
Because he does a lot of stuff with Matt Fraction and people like that, and they decompress the storytelling substantially compared to this. So, but I liked it too. I think it was an interesting story. Matt Murdock really is barely even a part of it. He's just sitting there getting his butt kicked for most of it.
Yeah.
It's kind of more a discussion between this little girl and this older guy who looks kind of like a schlubby Wilson Fisk, but he's not a Wilson Fisk. So,
yes.
No.
Yeah, so finally book 500 contains some pinups from some various authors and a reprint of the fantastic Frank Miller story from Volume 1, issue 191, called Roulette, which we actually spotlighted during our 1983 discussion.
No.
So if you had not seen that the first time. That is the one where Bullseye is lying in the bed after he's been basically paralyzed after falling from a high place when Daredevil didn't help him, but he didn't die, so he's lying in a hospital bed, and Daredevil is lamenting the fact that he can't kill the foe, even though all the bad things that Bullseye's done to him and to others. But he just sits there and has a moment there where he actually thinks about killing him right there in the hospital bed, but ends up not doing it and walking away.
Can I ask you something? In this issue, we have the end of Brubaker's run. We're going to get this reprint about Daredevil deciding that he can't kill Bullseye even because.
Right.
We then get a preview of the list and the Nascenti Aja story. That preview of the list does not include Bullseye blowing up the building or any of his talk about how Daredevil could have stopped it. How perfect and powerful would it have been if 500 had simply had the end of the Brubaker run, the story from the list where he faces off against Bullseye, the 107 people die, and Bullseye taunts him for not killing him. And then you roll into the reprint of the Frank Miller story, and it provides perfect context and really brings home how that story's been a part of the Daredevil legacy now for 30 years.
Right.
Instead, they give us the three jacks, which doesn't really move anything forward.
It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things.
True filler. And we get this preview of the list, which is like 7 pages. Just give us the other freaking 10 pages of the list, and you'd have had a really powerful issue 500 that actually resonated back to some of the key issues of. Now that I think about this,
you're not wrong. You're not wrong. No.
And you wouldn't have then had a story that's important to the Daredevil's like actual main storyline printed out of continuity in this other book.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. It definitely could have been done differently and really would have worked really well that way, but they didn't do it that way.
Because this Three Jack story, I'm betting, is almost exactly the length of the rest of the list story that they didn't finish here. So anyway,
yeah. pretty close, yeah.
And so, I like Nascenti. Aja's art's always fantastic, so it's a nice little diversion. But that story didn't mean anything to me. It was literally just filler. And I think they missed a real chance to make a 500th issue that really packed double the punch. Not only the fact that Brubaker's story kind of wrapping up with Daredevil taking over the hand was pretty fantastic, but then, giving us that sort of juxtaposed continuity and the like.
Yeah.
I'm going to write an angry letter in retrospect to everyone involved with this.
There we go.
Anyway.
Yeah, so that is issue 500. Like I said, I felt like because it was just this was the story of 2009, that the culmination of it needed to be highlighted. The fact that it was Ed Brubaker's last book, for now at least. I don't know if he ever makes it back onto the title, and then also just that it was great seeing Ann Nocenti again, even though that story didn't mean anything in the larger continuity of Daredevil. I really liked it. So yeah, that was why we picked it. I think it makes a lot of sense. It definitely stood out to me as being kind of the most important book of the year as well. So
yeah. And then I also find it interesting at the end of Brubaker's story in 500. Did you notice they've got a little card at the bottom where each of them, the writer, artists, everybody just sort of signed their name? Basically it says end, and it's got the signature of each person who is involved. Kind of just like them all signing off on, all right, we're out of here,
Yep.
So, yeah. It also does irritate me a little bit that on almost none of these do we have letter columns, which I would have liked. So I probably need to maybe go in and actually find my actual comics. There was I don't know if you noticed, but there was an actual cover gallery at the end as well, showing all 500 covers of the
Yes.
books that are considered to be the canon of the first 500 Daredevil issues, which is actually pretty straightforward because it's 380 books in the first run, and this is the 120th book of the second run.
Right.
So, no.
Yeah, that was something to see them all just side by side all the way down. They very small,
Very
like
small.
because they're there's 500 of them, and they trying to fit them all on one page is going to be difficult.
Yeah,
So,
there's
or
100 of them, 100 of them on a page, which does
Right.
not give you a whole lot of space for each one, but
Yeah.
still pretty cool.
Yeah. Should we move on and talk about the rapid fire questions then for this week?
All right, let's see how this goes. So, who's Matt in love with this year?
So I'm going to say it's Mila, though
Mhm.
thankfully he does decide to sort of let her go and stop fighting with Mila's parents over custody of her, given the fact that she's in sort of this difficult state because of everything that happened with Mr. Fear a year or two ago.
Yeah, and increasingly this has seemed just off the rails for me that he is continuing to try and hold on here. So I am glad that this is starting to wind down now. I do feel bad for him and for her and everything like that, but I think that this one needed to end because it's, especially once the whole Dakota thing started, I was like,
Yeah.
maybe he's not in love with his wife as he thinks he is. So
Right.
such is the way. But yeah, I would agree. At least for this year, that would be the correct answer. Biggest villain of this year?
Kingpin, as he is most years. He once again coming back and orchestrating the big thing that's going on here with
Yes.
that Return of the King. Yeah.
And technically, like, Lady Bullseye is also a big part of it. But the
Yes.
fact that she spends at least, that the weird thing too is that she spends a year, like I say, as his right hand, but she's also the catalyst for him coming back, which means in some ways she's the one that makes the Kingpin come back. So
Right.
So don't underestimate Lady Bullseye as well.
Right.
How about Matt practicing law this year? How'd that go for him?
There was no law this year. I did not see or remember any law happening this year for.
He was in chambers trying to negotiate the settlement with his wife's parents. So that technically was law. They were trying to. So he's still there.
I didn't even remember that.
He didn't make it into a courtroom this year, but he at least, until he was fired, he hasn't lost his law license recently. So that's good. Little baby steps, I guess.
Yeah, baby steps.
Anyone new know his identity?
So I'm going to say no, and I'm wondering whether or not this is even a question we need to keep asking, because it does sort of seem like the cat is out of the proverbial bag, as it were.
Even in the Daredevil Noir universe, everybody knew that Matt Murdock was Daredevil, and so
There you go.
It just doesn't seem to matter. How about Daredevil himself? Is he a good guy this year?
So hard to say that he's a good guy this year. I mean, teaming up with the Kingpin and then becoming the head of a band of ninja assassins doesn't seem like the actions of a good guy. If we're being honest about such things.
Sleeping with his employee while his wife is, trying to work her way out of an asylum.
Yeah.
There are ethical quandaries that he seems to be choosing bad paths on right now.
Right.
He is, on the other hand, not technically a bad guy either, and it doesn't seem. He tries. He's just really failing a lot right now.
Yeah.
I think Murdock is very much adrift.
It's not going to get any better next year, though.
So his friends are angry at him. He's in trouble all over the place.
Yeah.
How about the Daredevil outfitter equipment? Did that change at all?
Again, I didn't think I saw any changes to the outfitter equipment this year.
The only place really there would be to note is that in Daredevil Noir, he's got a very different outfit, and it has horns that kind of come out the front, more like little goat horns.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but that of course is not in the regular universe and everything else. It's a completely different thing.
Right.
How about Matt's past? We learn anything new?
We learned about how Stick came to be Matt's mentor in issue 500 with that flashback from Master Izo.
Yep.
That to me seemed like a pretty big,
Absolutely.
big thing.
And I'm interested now. This one. What is the biggest moment of the year for you?
So I think obviously Matt becoming the leader of the Hand is a huge moment, though I have a very close second, Foggy firing Matt from the law firm, because that one I did not see coming. I mean, given everything that Foggy Nelson has been through, being Matt's friend and law partner, I did not think he would actually get so frustrated and fed up with him that he would actually fire him from the law firm.
Yep. No, that was pretty shocking. I think both of these are definitely good choices. So the basically the first one, that is the final few panels of Brubaker's work, is Matt taking over the Hand. I also think that the few panels where Dakota comes into that one negotiation room, and then essentially it comes out that Matt's been sleeping with her, and you see Foggy's face. That was one of the moments of the year for me too. She's got a couple of panels there where Foggy's like, Christ, could it get any worse? And he's not surprised, obviously,
No,
because it's Matt and a woman. I mean,
Matt,
this is exactly what you would fear he would do. But I think still, he always manages to be shocked at his best friend's bad behavior. That's one of his defining traits. Is he always seems to somehow believe Matt is going to get it together, and he's always surprised when he doesn't, when he does something stupid again. You know.
Yes.
But I did love that, just kind of that. Foggy's there trying to help with the negotiations on the divorce or the whatever and everything, and then Matt just kicks him completely in the shin while he's trying to do it, and he's like,
Yeah.
"Really, dude?" So yeah. But I think yours were the right answers. When he takes over as the Hand, or as leader of the Hand, and then getting fired was pretty crazy too.
Yeah. All right, Dan, that is the year for Daredevil. So there's one more piece of business before we wrap up this week. Let's talk through the takeaway. This week's takeaway. All right, a lot has happened in 2009 across comics and in Daredevil, as we saw, as we've talked about earlier. If we're gonna sum up kind of 2009 in a nutshell for comics this year, what is the takeaway?
I think Daredevil's a good sort of summation, really, or a good example of what's going on in comics, and especially in Marvel, but really throughout the comics industry as a whole. And that is that it's been a tough decade for America. You've had 9/11, you've had the Iraq War, the Patriot Act, all of these things going on that have sort of really fractured our politics. You've had an economic meltdown with the housing industry sort of imploding, and a recession that really caused a lot of damage for a lot of families. Americans at this point were more pessimistic about the future than they had been in decades. And in comics, I think what this translates to is a year where we start to see just this uncertainty about what's right, and are our leaders actually people we can trust. The bad guys win this year in the Marvel Universe in Dark Reign. Norman Osborn takes over S.H.I.E.L.D. and creates Hammer, And the Avengers turn into the Dark Avengers. People who you think you can trust are actually bad guys under their disguises. The heroes at this point all seem to be questioning themselves and their place in society. A lot of them are in hiding, or they're trying to sort of find a way to sort of step on eggshells to keep from getting in trouble. The stories this year were just uncomfortably dark. And when you look at Daredevil, man, it's the same thing. You've got our hero actually teaming up with Kingpin. You've got our hero, by the end, deciding to actually take over a ninja death cult, right?
Yeah.
And there's no way Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were ever going to make Daredevil, or I guess I should say Stan Lee and Gene Colan, were ever going to make Daredevil the leader of a ninja death cult. You know?
No.
That's not the way it happens. And so this was just a really tough time in America, and it's a tough time in comics. Even looking back at it, a lot of these stories, a lot of them are really good. There's some fantastic creators out there doing stuff. But man, are they dark and cynical. And this year, Captain America's dead. He gets better, obviously, by the end of the year. But so many things have gone wrong in the Marvel Universe and in comics as a whole. And it really is a tough time. Again, 2-3 years ago, we were looking at that beginning of a golden age in comics. And a lot of that seems to be just sort of slamming down at this point. And we are coming into some very difficult storytelling. So.
Yes, and it doesn't get any lighter in 2010. It doesn't seem.
No, definitely not in Daredevil.
No,
and really in comics as a whole, there are a few things that do. But even in like the movies, there is no MCU movie this year, kind of like we talked about. Between 2008, you got the two that come out, and then it's 2011 when we get our next one. So there's 2009 and 2010. There are no MCU movies. There is a Wolverine movie that came out this year, which again, super dark. It's a story of Wolverine like killing his parents or his adopted dad or whatever, and the whole transformation where he gets his adamantium and fights with Sabretooth and everything. Really dark stuff. And so, this is an interesting year. I think these were great Daredevil comics.
Yeah.
But it was a little depressing to read a lot of this stuff these days, to be quite frank.
Yeah.
A little depressing.
A little bit. Yeah.
It's not to say it's, completely all dark. There were a few things that were kind of a little bit more like Hickman's FF. We talked about that a little bit and the like. But the Bendis Malieve Spider-Woman story was dark. Dark Avengers was dark. You had Iron Man, the end. The Ultimate Universe got blown up. It was a rough time to be in Marvel Comics in 2009. I would say we're looking for brighter days.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think that's going to wrap it up for us for this week. We'd like to thank you all for joining us. If you're new to the podcast, please consider subscribing on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get each new episode as soon as it's released. If you've already subscribed, we'd appreciate it if you'd share the show via social media or leave us a review. That'll help other new listeners find the show that much easier. Now, whether you're new to the podcast or you've been with us from the beginning, we'd love to get your thoughts on this week's show. What did you think of Return of the King and the big 500th issue? We'd love to hear your comments. You can send us those via email. That address is comments@comicsovertime.com, or you can reach out to us on social media. We're on Blue Sky @comicsovertime. Dan, it's a big year for Daredevil in 2009. And it looks to be an even bigger year in 2010.
Yep.
We got a lot to talk about starting next week.
Yeah, next year is crazy, man. Absolutely crazy. We're going to find out about something called Shadowland, that you have not heard about yet, but you're going to know more than you want to by the end of 2 weeks from now. So
Yes,
it's pretty
definitely.
nuts.
Until next week, take care, everybody.
See you later, folks.